Mysterious drones spotted in the New Jersey night sky, prompting an FBI investigation and temporary flight restrictions from the FAA. Multiple reports of this unusual aircraft activity around the Trump National Golf Course Club Bedminster, as well as a U.S. Army ammunition hub in Dover.
And there are more questions than answers into mysterious drones spotted over U.S. military bases in England over the past several days. The U.S. Air Force says the drones have not impacted the bases or their residents, but it hasn't ruled out if they were sent by agitators.
If you showed me pieces of a craft and you guaranteed me somehow that it came from outside the solar system, my first thought wouldn't be technology, it would be physics. Because everything is so far away from us, other than our solar system, that I would be wondering, well, how did it get here? When you look at the Civil War in the United States, it took place in the 1860s. Within less than 100 years, we were dropping fusion devices from jet aircraft. Less than 100 years, less than a single lifetime, means that we almost had a nuclear civil war, and it was a very near miss. Now, what separated the 1860s, which looked like antiquity to many of us, from 1952, when we have the first fusion weapon explode? It was changes in our understanding of the physical world. That means anytime you have a profound physical insight, post 1940s, you have to ask yourself, what Pandora's box would a new physical insight potentially open? And I don't know why we're not more worried about this. I think because we've been failing at physics for 50 years, we've gotten out of the habit of thinking physics is really dangerous and you have to track every single important physicist. Because any change in our physical understanding of the universe can unlock holy hell.
Were there actually updates in physics, maybe mid-century, that were not disclosed to the public?
Another puzzle we would love to have cleared up is an understanding of the role of aerospace companies as holders of potentially basic scientific knowledge not shared with the academic world. Is it possible? It seems very wrong to me.
Maybe wrong, but it's true.
It is true. You believe it's true.
Yeah, I know it's true.
You know that there's physics knowledge held by aerospace companies that is not
There
known.
certainly is materials knowledge.
Materials, well, okay, material
which
science.
involves topological physics or whatever.
Okay, but fundamental physics as opposed to, condensed matter or.
Right. Certainly aerospace corporations have knowledge in the UAP area that specifically are sequestered against FOIA.
Oh,
because of proprietary
I appreciate
labels, which the whole thing was set up to be that way on purpose.
Right, but the idea that there would be fundamental physics knowledge that would be housed in an aerospace company and not shared with the physics community, there is no evidence of that.
No evidence for it, not that I know of.
And I wouldn't.
That doesn't mean it's not the case, but
That would be this crazy, egregious
it would change our entire concept of who we are if somebody kept fundamental physics secret in the years since we became capable of exploding fusion devices. Right. I would grab a pitchfork and a tiki torch, and I would march on the National Science Foundation.
Right.
I still can't believe that that's true.
it would only be if it were the case that in fact we have mastered anti-gravity and they're being built by aerospace corporations, then new physics would have to be involved.
Is this so? This is FLIR footage.
Yep. So this is when I say FLIR, this is what I'm referring to, and right in the middle, at the top of the screen, you see IR, infrared. So that's that infrared mode where we're seeing heat right now. We are in black hot, so that means objects that are darker are hotter. So this object right in the middle is putting heat out.
And right now it appears to be rotating. Is that what it was doing there?
Yeah, exactly. So we do see this object rotate. I mean, it looks like a gimbal. That's why it's called it, I think. I didn't name it. But we see the object essentially rotate from what looks like a horizontal position here. Those lines above it represent the horizon, so it's essentially parallel. There it goes.
And it's hard to make out the shape of this thing, but it seems almost like a disc with like a crown on the top and the bottom.
Yeah, kind of like it looks like almost like a little bit of energy coming out from the poles there, if you will. That's kind of how I describe it. I see like a little bit of the dark, heat emanating from there, or the energy, as I call it.
And is there any way from this video, from this equipment, to detect how large this thing is?
There is. So the velocity vector in the middle there can be set to a particular size, and that size correlates to a particular length. So that in a dogfight, if you have, you're behind a guy and you essentially, his wingspan is equal to the length of those two lines on that circle with the lines coming out. You see that? That's the velocity vector. Then you know how far away he is, right? And so it's kind of like an analog thing that's not super relevant, like in modern age. But yes, there is. I don't know, however, what that is set to in this one, so I can't make that calculation for you right now.
Now, I know some people who have attempted to debunk this and debunk even the rotation of this object. How do you know that object is rotating? Definitively.
Well, so we don't, right? We don't necessarily definitively know it's rotating at the end of the day, right? We have evidence that it is, but I don't have definitive evidence that you're a conscious human being on the other side of the table with me either. But
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Like, we just don't have that information.
So you only have video footage, and in the video footage, it appears right now in relation to where it sits on the clouds that it has rotated.
Yes. So we can also see if you and I know it's been done. People have created models out there that essentially look at the clouds and they draw out a flight path that this could be at, and the only variable is essentially how far away the object is. And that flight path obeys an equation that can be observed pretty readily when you build the little model. And essentially, if you're at 6 miles or so, the object is proceeding in a direction, and then when it starts to rotate, as the aircraft described, it climbs and reverses directions.
The storyline basically is that there's a lot of work going on in the aerospace industry that would indicate that we have black projects that have gone even darker, and that there's work being done on electrogravitic, on scalar technology, etc., that we don't even think that those in Congress or even in the military that approve black budgets are aware of.
I've seen copies of inter-office correspondence among defense contractors that openly stated that they felt the technology was a fundamental enabling technology, that it had all kinds of different defense applications, but it also had a lot of serious civilian applications that would be beneficial to humanity as a whole, to the environment. It seems obvious that someone, perhaps a group, maybe some kind of a rogue civilization within our society, has captured the technology. They're exploiting it for their own aims, for their own interests, whatever those might be. There's not a sliver of doubt in my mind that it exists, that it's being exploited in some way, whether it's for intelligence collection, whether it's for logistical support, whether it's for retrieval of raw materials from the asteroid belt. I have no idea why or what it's used for. All I know is that it's extremely advanced. It's being used more and more. I can only say that all the people who've sought to figure out what's going on using the Freedom of Information Act have kind of overlooked the fact that if this was a purely corporate endeavor and not a government-sanctioned endeavor, that it may be one way in which the technology can be completely overlooked and skirt the reach of the Freedom of Information Act. Because if it's considered trade secret or corporate property, so to speak, or controlled by corporations, it may be possible that they could keep this secret for a very long time. even with, you know, people actively in the government that know that it exists and maybe have contact with some of these corporate officials that control the technology. So, you know, you're kind of left with, you know, a big question mark as to, you know, where's all this advanced technology going and what's it being used for? You know, I mean, if there was somebody that had this sort of interstellar trade program going on with another civilization, you know, that would be very interesting, but I can't understand why they would want to keep that quiet. I mean, it would seem like such a mind-expanding, enlightening thing for people to know about. Maybe we'd stop shooting at each other and start thinking about how can we get along with the people on, you know, stars or star systems, you know, that are around us. So it's hard to say.
It would only be if it were the case that in fact we have mastered anti-gravity and they're being built by aerospace corporations, then new physics would have to be involved.
Is what is called the golden age of general relativity tied to these topics? That is, there was this bizarre surge of activity in general relativity between, you know, I would say the time of Einstein in the 50s or something like that. There wasn't a ton of development in GR, and then suddenly there was this explosion. There was a...
Well, there's the explosion. There's a famous series came out in the Miami Herald and other newspapers in probably the 50s. The author was Talbert, and he did a series where he found out that a number of aerospace engineering companies were suddenly interested in anti-gravity, and that people like DeWitt on up and down, really top level physicists, were suddenly getting grants to look at the idea of anti-gravity. For example, the gravity essay came along.
This is from the Gravity Research Foundation in Boston.
Right. And so it looked like it was going to be a big explosion. But anyway, then it all sort of quieted down. And I could take two implications of that, and that is it quieted down because nobody ever got anywhere, or it quieted down because they did get somewhere and it went black.
My understanding is that there were really twin loci of activity, one of which surrounds a Gravity Research Foundation in New Boston, New Hampshire, and I guess that was the work of Babson, and the story is sort of not really very plausible, that his sister had drowned in a pond or something to that effect. And so he had gravity as his sworn enemy. You know this story?
No, I had not heard this.
Oh, yeah. So Babson contacted Lewis Whitten, who was coming out of Johns Hopkins, and then oddly, the similarly named individual named Bainson, with some sort of tobacco or air conditioning fortune, reaches out to Bryce DeWitt and asks whether he will found an institute at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, for the study of physical fields.
And particularly focusing on gravity.
Particularly focused on gravity. Now somehow DeWitt has the courage to answer this essay contest in the other silo and destigmatizes it. So there was money to be had, but nobody wanted to touch it because of fear of ridicule from their colleagues. And then there's a famous gravity conference at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, that sort of kicks a lot of this off. It's a tremendous flurry of activity at a time when anti-gravity was trying to break into respectability. At a minimum, we know that the Glenn Martin Company, where Martin was an early pioneer, I think from the time of the Wright brothers, that the Glenn Martin Company becomes Martin Marietta, later becomes Lockheed Martin, so that word Martin is coming all the way through, was employing, I believe, Lewis Whitten, Edward Whitten's father, to do anti-gravity research, somehow tied up with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio and the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. So there's something about aerospace in the 1950s and sort of post-Manhattan Project era that's pretty potent. And we're confused by this. Why was Solomon Lefschetz, the great topologist, recruited to be involved with Lewis Whitten and to have an entire nonlinear group working on mathematics that then gets moved to Brown University when I believe that these programs are sunsetted. So they get spun off back into the academic ecosystem. I don't know what any of this is.
So you have top physicists working on
But you have
crazy
to-
stuff,
but
anti-gravity.
Most physicists don't know this story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, I knew it because it was weird. It stood out. The Lewis Witten, Edward Witten story has never been fully made sense. The world's most brilliant physics mind of our time is the son of the country's most prominent and important anti-gravity researcher of the 1950s.
Do you think that string theory, which Ed Witten worked on, is intentionally a bridge to nowhere?
I have privately said to you that string theory was a very odd development because it both allowed physics to proceed as if it was doing something new while breaking no new ground in the physical world in which we live. I don't really know. If you were trying to stagnate the field, string theory is pretty brilliant.
So at what point, describe the evolution of your knowledge here? I mean, did you realize that this thing that you're working on came out of a flying saucer?
Well, of course, I know that technology doesn't exist at all.
Why?
Well, it doesn't. Take my word for it. It's just technology that doesn't exist yet. I mean, you're talking about that science doesn't even know what gravity is, much less how to produce it or control it. And here is a device that's producing it and controlling it and using it as propulsion. So
you're telling me there's a different physics. That was your job. You were working on that.
The science was something we were trying to figure out, but we knew how the devices would operate. You know, for instance, the propulsion of the craft. Everything that we have, whether it's a propeller plane or a jet or a rocket, it throws something out the back, either high-speed exhaust or a large volume of air. It's an action-reaction force. The action is you throw something out the back and it moves you forward. That's how everything works. This is the first time there's a craft it's a reactionless craft. It's a field propulsion craft. And what it does is it creates a distortion in space and time in front of it, where space actually bends. And my analogy to that has always been, put a bowling ball in the middle of your bed, and then a foot in front of it, take your fist and push down on the mattress. The bowling ball will roll towards it. And that's exactly how the craft works. It creates a distortion right in front of it, and the craft falls forward.
So there's a different physics that we're not...
Well, the science that explains how the technology works. I mean, it's all encompassed as one thing, alien technology and science.
What is the big picture? What is the takeaway of your story after you're gone? You're not a rebel kid with a jet car at Los Alamos today. Today's a different Bob Lazar, right?
Right. What
have we learned? What's the message of your story?
The big thing is the suppression of extremely advanced technology and the suppression of unknown science. That's it. Those two things, to me, is the only thing that's important about what was going on out there. Yeah, there's another civilization, and like I've said before, that's a crime not to tell humanity about that, but that's a separate thing.
Meaning that there is something different in science dramatically that we're not allowed to know?
Right. Right.
That is a true statement.
Yeah, that's a true statement.
The fact that there is another intelligent, technologically advanced civilization, we have some of their objects.
That is really the pinnacle. That there's another civilization in existence that's intelligent that we know about. And we actually have artifacts from them that can operate. So, I mean, that's a big, big deal. But in my mind, there's a lot to deal with that. However, the science and the technology can change us dramatically. It can change the way the entire world operates, the economy, everything. So those stick out in my mind as being critically important.
And we have it.
Oh, we have them. You don't have to believe it, but we do.
And you've seen it.
I've seen it.
And you've touched it.
I've dismantled it.
What was your function working on this? You were doing what? What was your job?
We were to reverse engineer the power and propulsion system of this craft and see if it can be duplicated with available materials.
I just want to go over with you what it is that you saw, to draw it out for people, to make a sketch. As you're seeing it, as if you're there at that moment, kind of go back in the past.
It's the thing I termed the sport model. Underneath this floor, there are three large cylindrical devices. These are on mounts that allow them to completely swivel up to 180 degrees and in 360 degree rotation. Directly above each one is a small rectangular object. This is on the floor above. And these are the gravity amplifiers themselves. Looking down from the top, you'd have the center. In the very center, there is a small reactor. Surrounding this, in three equally spaced areas, are the amplifiers. So this is looking at it sideways, this is looking at it down from the top. And under these amplifiers, underneath, on the floor below, are the gravity emitters. So it's the reactor here powering the gravity amplifiers. Gravity amplifiers output goes into the gravity emitters at the bottom, and the resulting gravity beam or anti-gravity wave can be pretty much put anywhere you want it to. There was another level up here. Now I had access and was permitted to view and look at the operation of this main level with the gravity amplifiers and the level below, the gravity emitters. There is a level above which consisted of these two areas that I'm not all that familiar with. I assume these to be some sort of navigational engine. People call these large black rectangular areas on the top portholes. I believe they were some planar sensor array that just took in information from the surrounding area, whether it be patterns of stars or what have you. And there was their version of a computer or something to make determinations here that takes input from those sensors and then let the craft know how to orient itself and where it was in space. So that's what I assumed to be up there. I don't know for a fact. Again, that was not part of my job, and I was only led to believe that. The center antenna is really an extension of the reactor in the center, and that's a waveguide, which allows the emission of the gravity wave, which forms kind of a heart shape over the whole craft. That's how it creates its distortion. These gravity emitters can be swung all the way up to 180 degrees. And this allows the craft to essentially stand on two of them and hover, while this one swings up and creates a distortion in front of it, allowing the craft to slide forward. So that's how their low power mode, Omicron configuration operate. The Delta configuration uses all three, and unlike science fiction movies where you see flying saucers just flying along like that, they actually fly belly first. The craft flies along, leaves the atmosphere of the planet, it turns its belly to the destination, the three amplifiers focus in on the destination, and that's how it proceeds. So that's basically the operation of it and overall how things were laid out inside the craft.
This is an alien spacecraft.
Right, obviously.
So I began looking at the scientific literature. I was looking at this scalar energy, anything I could find on zero-point energy, scalar energy, quantum zero-point fluctuations of the vacuum, I think is the more technical physics term that they use in the literature. And it turned out that there really were scientific papers that were being published by a number of different scientists, Hal Puthoff, Bernard Heisch, Alfonso Rueda, who just happened to work at Lockheed Skunk Works, by the way. So I started noticing the names and where they worked and what they do, what they were talking, what they're publishing. And it occurred to me that, maybe these are people who have some insider. So I started looking at that. I started looking at the things that Hal Puthoff had said.
In the middle of last century, physicists made an astounding discovery. And that is what we ordinarily consider empty space isn't empty at all. Even if you go to the far reaches of outer space, it turns out that rather than emptiness, what we call the vacuum is really a seething cauldron of what we call quantum energy, or zero-point energy. Zero point just simply means that even if you froze the entire universe down to absolute zero, froze out all motion, where everything would be as quiet as you could possibly get it, this energy is still there. It was predicted by the mathematics of quantum theory, but the numbers were so large. For example, there's enough energy in the volume of a coffee cup to evaporate the world's oceans. It was thought, well, this must be some kind of artifact of the theory. But as time went on, various predictions in quantum theory were verified in the laboratory, and it finally turned out we had to take these numbers seriously.
So I opened up a correspondence with Hal Puthoff, and he was very gracious in taking time to talk to me on the phone, send me copies of the peer-reviewed papers that he had published in Physics Review, Physics A, Physics B, and I couldn't understand the mathematics with all these Greek symbols, and I mean it was really advanced theoretical stuff. But what I was able to follow were the paragraphs that were before and after the equations that explained what all the math was talking about. And so as I went through these papers and I would talk to Hal, he would explain to me, well, this means that this is a certain process, a polarization process that happens in the vacuum of space-time, and when you do that, you have this kind of phenomenon. When you do that, you have this other phenomenon. And the papers that he wrote started to indicate the zero-point energy that's embedded in the environment.
Is responsible for the effects of inertia and gravity and mass, and the reason why, as you accelerate through space-time, the mass of your vehicle increases.
So in a sense, if you find the right way to do it, you can actually sort of reduce the mass of an object. And if you can do that, then of course it takes less propulsive force to push it around. It means that it can go a lot faster because it's not limited by the amount of mass that it increases to as it accelerates. In fact, it may in fact be a situation where the faster you go, the more energy you have available to continue the acceleration process, and at the same time the mass is becoming relatively less and less and less. So it really enables the possibility of being able to go faster than the speed of light without violating general relativity, and that was the most fascinating aspect of the whole thing.
You're drawing energy from the environment, and in the process of doing that, you're enabling the craft to not only demass itself, but basically conserve energy by using the flux in the vacuum of space-time as the power source for your propulsion system. So literally, the faster you go, the more energy you have available that you convert into propulsive force, and the lower the relative mass of the vehicle becomes. So it's actually sort of an inversely proportional kind of a relationship.
Most scientists, with an instant response, would think on special relativity terms and say, well, the velocity of light is a limitation. You can't go faster than the speed of light. And therefore, to conceive of us exploring stars or other people coming here, it's too far. They just can't get from here to there. We might explore our own solar system, but that's probably as far as we're going to get. But the truth of the matter is that in general relativity, that's not the case. There are options there. That limitation now has begun to evaporate due to the new understandings and predictions coming out of general relativity. So that's not the issue.
And so I was starting to learn about the technology and how it might be playing a role in the function of this craft. The craft, of course, had oxygen tanks and stuff in it, so it really suggested that the thing was capable of going out into space. The idea was that somehow this vehicle is able to sort of skirt the law in a way that allows it to do these things that are unheard of.
Hey, there's a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
So that's something that people comment on, is as it's going, it's got this rotation, and it's not, if what we're seeing is correct, and it's rotating, and it is actually shaped like that, let's say.
It's kind of hard, really, to see the shape.
I know, it's really hard.
Is that, in fact, the shape, or is that, if this is just a heat signature, are we seeing the bloom from it? Just the infrared image. I mean, what is the actual visible item look like? Is it, and there's a little protrusion on the top, or in this case, the bottom there. Is that just heat, or is that the shape of the craft?
So we're not going to be able to answer that. A lot of people have the exact questions that you're asking there.
Is there any more of this? Is that this is the only video?
There is more, but it's not declassified. It's not allowed to be out in the public. So I happen to personally know these videos are longer.
Okay.
But what's been released to the public is small snippets, because remember the whole methods and that sort of thing. They don't want to release too much. Right. Any FLIR video is classified by nature because of what it could show to potential enemies.
Right.
So there are much longer videos. This is all we get. And I'm not asking you to validate what you're seeing here.
No, I couldn't.
Yeah, people have huge questions. But why this is interesting, and a lot of people ask me, is that the craft will...
It is interesting that it did rotate like that, because the craft that I worked on, that when it's going to travel a long distance, that is how it operates. It flies along and it puts its belly to the target, and then brings all the amplifiers to power, and it shoots off in that direction. Now, if it did something like that, I would say that's
we don't know.
Incredibly similar.
Yeah, we don't know, but that is kind of the point of me showing that I wanted to talk to you about that. So you often discuss the craft you worked on, how it's like this, and then it would turn its belly towards where it wanted to go.
Yeah, if it's going to fly fast or long distances, it doesn't fly as it would in science fiction movies. It flies with the belly, the bottom forward.
And the occupants, if there are occupants inside this craft, when it flips and points its belly somewhere, can you explain kind of what happens to those occupants?
It's generating its own gravitational field, so it really is not just shielded by its own field, but the Earth's field, where you would think they would tilt up and they would fall down inside, that really has no bearing on it. The craft is generating its own gravity. They're standing straight up, or whatever. Your glass of water is sitting there and it's not spilling. I mean, the bottom of the craft is always pulling all matter to it.
So the way it's designed is that if there's occupants in it, as it were to move, the occupants would not notice a single difference in their gravitational field.
No, nothing at all.
So this craft can
at
move.
Any speed.
So the Tic Tac, Commander David Fravor talks about watching this object that was like a Tic Tac, cylinder's 46 feet, whatever, and like it would bounce. He said to me personally, like a ping pong ball in a glass. Bah, 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 bah. Sometimes it would slow down, and it would move, and then it didn't have to slow down. He said, as it went from one point to another, just it would bounce off, and go one direction and come back. So that's what you're talking about, and what you call that inertia, or what you said, how you explain that.
Well, I mean, that it might only look that way too. It's really difficult to know for sure, because if you are manipulating the space around the craft, I mean, time and space around there. It may just appear that way. You know, it may just be an artifact of the way the craft's operating. It's not really bouncing back and forth like that, but it's just appearing that way, the way they're distorting the space and moving around.
But either way,
it's something we.
It's a gravity-driven craft because you need, if you're distorting.
Yeah, if you're coming to a dead stop, you know, from high speed or making ridiculous movements like that, shaking back and forth. Yeah, that's not a convention. It's not conventional technology at all.
So when I told you about the way that Commander Fravor, who is, you know, one of the top fighter pilots in America, especially at that time, and he described this craft moving the way it did, you said that's got to be, if it moved like that, it's got to be a gravity-propelled craft.
Yeah, you really can't move any other way like that.
And so, like the craft you worked on, that is the key, the gravity propulsion.
Right.
Okay. So these videos that have come out, in some ways, we've talked about this, this is, in very small ways, vindicated some of your story. The government has admitted they have a UFO program, albeit a reactionary UFO program to military sightings.
Right. Well, back in '89, I think they said the only UFO research or program they did was Project Blue Book, which had come to an end a long time ago, and there was nothing going on. So if they admitted there was a program, so they're admitting that that was a lie, and that there really was a program continuing, which is a big step. I'm surprised they did that.
And they also admitted that there are materials associated with UFOs, but inside sources say that there's actually a lot more than just a metal that was discharged from a UFO, that they may even have a craft. Inside sources meaning people like George Knapp who have their finger on the pulse of all this. Mm-hmm. If they admit something beyond the fact that they just have alloys, although that's a big deal. You know, that they have
That's
alloys.
A tremendous deal.
It's a tremendous deal. And they said that the alloy itself, they're calling it a metamaterial, that the design of the material is essential to the way the craft functions, which kind of makes sense. If it's,
that's not a surprise, yeah.
Right. Anyway, so it's a new day. It's quite interesting. Just thought I'd show you this and, you know, let's see.
Yeah, I'd sure like to see the rest of it, but I'm sure everybody would, too.
Everybody would, too. Yeah. And, you know, I'm hopeful that something's going to happen, but at least we get little bits and, you know, in little ways, you and George, you know, putting his neck out on the line because he believed you from day one.
He didn't just believe me. He spent a lot of time and we traveled all over.
He went with you into Los Alamos to your work.
Right.
He put you through 2 or 3 polygraph tests.
Yeah, this was no.
George Knapp had you sit down with people who he knew worked at Area 51 and landed, you know, from McCarran on the Janet flights, landed there, and they asked you questions and put you through your paces. He doesn't advertise this, but the people he sat you with, they said, oh yeah, he's saying it right. So that's another confirmation that George didn't just believe you. He put you through your paces.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It took a long, long time before.
People don't appreciate that. They just get the end result, which is that people like George vouch for you. But they didn't get to hear all the things he did to poke at you to see is Bob.
Yeah, it was years to get to that point, literally. So.
And over that time, you did develop a friendship with George.
Oh yeah.
How can you not going through something?
Yeah,
like
we
that?
spent a lot of time together. Yeah. Sure.
And he found your name, the phone book at Los Alamos, you know, showing that even though they denied you were never there you were in the phone book.
Right. As well as Joe, the person that I worked with at Los Alamos.
George interviewed Joe.
Right, and he was in the phone book, you know, with me. We worked in the same place, so.
The world has never seen you like in Los Alamos, right? But I actually have some home videotape of you where you're walking through Los Alamos with Joe Vaninetti. You guys are just walking around laughing about how people say you never worked there, and you're in Los Alamos together. I have that footage.
Oh, wow.
And you also go to this one place and you find a piece of concrete in the ground. And in that concrete, you brush off some pine needles and you go, oh my God. And in that footage is your name with like 1981. There you were at Los Alamos and you had carved your name in cement.
Oh, you know what that is? That's where we put in, back then they were called Earth stations. Big satellite dish. But, you know, now they're 2 feet. They used to be 7 feet across and larger. And, yeah, I remember putting in that pad and putting in a big, you know, Earth station satellite receiver there. But yeah, that was around 82 or 83, something like that. No, maybe
Yeah, I don't remember what
But it was
year
in
in
the 80s,
81.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. But
it was in Los Alamos.
And you made a joke and you brushed off the pine needles and you go, "Oh yeah, see, Stan, I never worked there." And it was funny because you just like rediscovered it. So you've never been like really deeply interested in like proving everybody wrong that you're right, and that's been admirable.
No, I don't care. In fact, like I always said, I prefer everybody don't believe it because then nobody bothers me. There's, he's crazy and that's it.
Yeah, it makes your life.
If everybody believed the story, I would be hounded till the end of time. So really, I don't really care.
Well, that is the deal. If everybody did believe your story, we'd be looking at something totally different. I mean, that might blow shit up.
We are monitoring breaking news from Southeast Asia tonight, where Malaysia Airlines is reporting they have lost contact with flight MH3.
Well, what are they hiding about a missing airline that disappeared 10 years ago? There really is a cover-up related to this plane. The United States must know exactly what happened to this plane. If this plane did crash into the ocean, it would have been leaked to the internet. Here's satellite imagery. United States saw it. Here's exactly where it crashed. Blah, blah, blah. The person who leaked these videos had an emotional reaction.
Just witnessed 270 people disappear, and I have to tell people about this.
So why are we seeing a flash here? Because we're breaking through the fabric of reality. Like, is that aliens? Oh no, this is us. We've got these black projects and we've figured out this technology that's well above the public's understanding. And you go, well, how are they hiding all this? And the answer is they're not. It's all in the open. All the scientific papers are published. I look at that technology in those videos, and to me, it's very easy to see how that could become a doomsday weapon. But I think that even as amazing as it is to say that we teleported a Boeing 777 in 2014, that's just the beginning. When talking about the MH370 case, the plane that disappeared in 2014, I thought there must be a rational explanation for everything that had kind of gone on with this plane. And the more I started digging into it, the more I found out that there really is a cover-up related to this plane. The United States must know exactly what happened to this plane, which then leads us to the question, what are they hiding? Well, what are they hiding about a missing airline that disappeared 10 years ago? Why have we never found it? And when you look at the MH370 videos, which we'll look at here today, you go, wow, that's what they're hiding. It seems impossible, but it makes sense. The total story makes sense. And now I'm not out here to pretend like I know every answer, but I think that the investigation has put together such a strong, compelling, comprehensive story and case that it's not easily dismissed. And it really demands an answer from the United States government specifically on what are we hiding about this plane? If it's not the MH370 videos, what is it? Where is this thing?
What was the date of the plane disappearance?
March 8th, 2014.
Okay.
So you've got March 8th, 2014, plane disappears. He's assigned the VPU-2 Wizards, February 2014, some date. And then April 2nd, they're investigating him. This is huge because you look at the satellite video and you can tell this is a remote terminal Citrix session, like they're logged into another database. There's going to be logs for that. U.S. government's got logs for that. They're going to find this person. The moment they see this video on the internet, they're going to find the person that leaked this. They're going to find Edward C. Lin. And the United States government ended up having to admit that they had no evidence that he was a spy at all. You're like, wait, you're charging him with espionage, but you have no evidence? They had to admit that.
Wow.
That's crazy.
When was this?
So this was all 2014 through 2016. So they put him in pretrial detainment and they would not let him out. To me, that says you're scared of him talking to the media. They were terrified of the case going to trial because the only evidence they had against him was the videos that he leaked. And you would have to show the evidence publicly if that's the case. So instead, what did they do? They sent something called the Goon Squad on him while he was in pretrial detainment. Basically abused him legally as much as you could. Put somebody out in the cold, ruffle their cell, whatever you got to do. Maybe hit him with some oranges so there's no bruises, stuff like that, right? And he reported this too, by the way. All of this is public information, that he had been abused by this Goon Squad in pretrial detainment. And they basically forced him into a plea deal. Now, why did they have to force him into a plea deal? Because they couldn't show the evidence. So I think Edward C. Lin is a patriot by all accounts. And when they come and tell him, hey, you just leaked our most secret super weapons, right? Like, we gave you access to nuclear weapons and you betrayed us by leaking this footage on the internet. Maybe even not directly. Maybe he just showed somebody else and they leaked it. Hard to say. But ultimately, Edward C. Lin is the source, in my opinion. And I think he said, okay, I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that. I'm a patriot. I love this country. Thank you for naturalizing me, etc. And then they said, okay, well, you've got to say you're sorry and say you messed up and take this plea deal. Because by taking the plea deal, we don't have to deal with this anymore. We don't ever have to show anybody any of this. And bonus for the military, now Edward C. Lin can never talk about the videos ever again, not even after the plea deal, because that plea deal is going to exist even after his sentence. It's like a condition of the plea deal, is that, yes, we'll drop these espionage charges, but even after you get out of prison, you're not going to be able to talk about this with anyone.
So he can't talk about it today?
Probably not. I've tried to reach out to him several times. And honestly, I plan to find him. I do plan to find him because I think that he's one of the only ways we can prove these videos are real.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if I do find him and he's like, yep, I leaked the videos, half the world's going to say he's lying, he's making it up for clout, but fine. I mean, some people are never going to believe no matter what, right? If he comes out and says that there's no, it's all over. Like if he says he leaked these videos, like I didn't magically find this guy, I had no idea who he was before. I've tried to reach out to him, never been able to directly talk to him. I spoke to his lawyers. I made a renewed push a few weeks ago, talked to his lawyer's office again, said, look, I need to talk to this guy. He's the guy that leaked these videos. I'm saying his name on all these podcasts. He's never reached back out to me. I finally got in touch with their lawyers, and they said, we can't talk about his case at all unless he gives a full release. Like, we can say nothing about it. And I'm sitting there telling him, like, this guy leaked these crazy videos that are on the internet, and he's going viral, and he doesn't even know it, you know? Continue to say that. I found a few phone numbers related to him, tried to call them, can't get anybody to pick up. Left a message on one. Maybe it's his phone number, maybe not. A year ago, I called a number that I was pretty sure was him. Somebody picked up and hung up right away without letting it go to voicemail or anything. So, like, there's something going on here. Because you imagine, like, if it's you and you went to prison, right? And by the way, he got a 9-year sentence after a plea deal, after dropping the espionage charges. That's a long, long time. Even in his appeals, he argued that the sentence was way overly harsh relative to similar cases of dissemination of classified information, which is all the charges that were left. They shaved 3 years off of his case for, the plea deal and good behavior and stuff like that. That's still 6 years in prison. So this guy spent 6 years in prison.
Where does he live now?
I don't know exactly where he lives, and I'm not sure I would say on a podcast necessarily if I did know. But he did get out. He would be out by now. Have tried to track him down. It's going to be really hard, especially if he's in the wind now. Like, I don't know how to really pull him out. But if he's out there, I need to talk to Edward C. Lin. We need to get to the bottom of this thing about these videos if he leaked these. But just to add a little bit more weight, other cases where people were actually like convicted of espionage, the U.S. government will say what it was they leaked. They say, oh, they exchanged weapons secrets with China, or they gave satellite imagery to somebody. Heck, there was a case of a contractor in Africa who was facing capital punishment, death penalty, over having stolen satellite imagery. And you're going, wow. So, like, even in cases where death penalty is on the table, they're going to tell you what it was that they leaked. Maybe not show you exactly, but they tell you. Edward C. Lin's case, nada. Nothing that's consistent with coming down on somebody for 9 years after a plea deal. They even had to have the military testify as to why what he leaked was so damaging. Why would they need to do that? Shouldn't it just be obvious, right? Like, if you're a judge, like, you leaked some satellite data. That should be obvious, right? Why is the military having to testify to the judge and to the lawyers and stuff about why this was so dangerous? Well, when you look at the MH370 videos and you see some orbs of energy spinning around the plane and zapping it out of the sky, that requires some explanation. Like, is that aliens? Oh, no, this is us. We've got these black projects and we've figured out this technology that's well above the public's understanding. That to me explains why they would have to do it. So,
yeah. What's the best way to look at the videos? Let's get Ryan to pull up the videos.
Yeah, so we've got the satellite video right here. This is satellite video, airliner, and UFOs. This is the first video that was published May 19th, 2014. And right away, I mean, look at the detail of these clouds. These are not CGI clouds. The people who have been trying to debunk this claim that these are pictures of clouds, but we can actually categorically rule that out, factually speaking, because the clouds actually move and evolve. Now, they don't visibly move, obviously, over a 5-second window, which is which each perspective we're going to see here shifts is only a few seconds. But if you actually do forensic analysis and look at like the first frame and last frame, you can see the clouds jiggling and moving and evolving. Like normally if the clouds were just moving, you'd see like the whole thing like shift, but no, you see like the top like shift, which is consistent with wind shear as well. And also, again, we have two videos and two different perspectives from two completely different angles.
Right.
So these are big clues.
Where all the clouds match up perfectly.
Yeah, the clouds match up. And the best one is
and
like,
the plane and,
if you like mirror the drone video, because one's from one angle, one's from the other. So if you mirror the drone video, it's still not a perfect comparison, but you can actually see the clouds line up where you could triangulate the position of the drone cropped out of the satellite video with pretty good accuracy. And look at that stuff. It's like, to me, I don't know how people rationalize that as being fake. It's too much detail.
So why do you think Lynn cropped the drone out of the video?
I think for the same reasons he may have cropped other assets out of the video. He was trying to minimize damage to U.S. intelligence. Like these videos, when you look at them, the person who made these was trying to give you just enough hints to solve the case without extra stuff that would damage U.S. sources and methods. At the same time, though, it's a blurry line. Like what we got here was enough information for us to figure out how satellite systems work, figure out how we like run our operations, figure out how they pull this data up. Like one of the biggest discoveries of the satellite video we're looking at here is that they're beaming data from satellites, from constellations of satellites scanning the globe all the time to ground-based computers, and then they're building this map of the world, but with full video surveillance coverage.
Right.
Like the ultimate. Yeah, here it is right here.
That's really that's what we're doing.
Yeah, so in the bottom left, it says NROL 22, and we reverse engineered this and found that NROL 22 is the first launch of the space-based infrared system in 2006. I think it was Annie Jacobson that was talking about this system on Joe Rogan.
Space-based infrared system, and this is known. This is
you're
public?
looking at it right here. This is Lockheed Martin's website that you're staring at right here.
Okay,
and so this was operational in 2013.
Okay.
Well, it's not really. This is the thing. Like this is why I call it suppression. Yeah. It's not a secret. It's just suppressed. Like the public isn't aware. But you look at this and you look at the size of the scans. They have these scanners and they have stairs. So they can do these large, lower quality scans of huge areas. And if they want, then they can scan in for higher quality resolution of smaller areas. And we're not just staring down through satellites. Like when we're using infrared or synthetic aperture radar is another method. Synthetic aperture radar is like basically like the dark night. When you are like using people's cell phones to like map the whole world. Synthetic aperture radar is scanning down the whole world and they're rebuilding like a three-dimensional environment that you can interact with. And this should be obvious now in 2024, where it's like none of this is far beyond the paradigm of technology. Like you think about it, you go, of course the United States government's using this stuff. And here's an example of, I think, synthetic aperture radar. That's why it says XSAR radar on the bottom. And this is aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour. But this is also what we do when we send probes to like Pluto and stuff like that. We're not taking visual imagery. We're pulling data and then we're recreating the image. And that's what these constellations of satellites are doing, which should tell you there's no way in hell that a plane is disappearing in 2014 when that system was already online.
Right.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that this satellite video right here in the bottom left says NROL 22, which is the first launch of the space-based infrared system. That's a pretty weird coincidence.
Yeah, that the creator of if this was forged, that the creator would have any idea what that was.
Why would you put that down there?
Right.
And here's another little fun fact. Newsweek tried to debunk this video on August 9th, 2023. This was 2 days after the videos reemerged on Reddit. So somebody at Newsweek or somebody who controls Newsweek was watching these videos reemerge and they were like, we got to go push a debunk. And they didn't even come up with their own. They copied France 24's debunk, literally word for word. Like they used an AI to strip it. And they actually got the only fact wrong. France 24 tried to debunk this video claiming that it says NRL 33. NRL 33 wasn't launched till after the plane disappeared. So that would debunk it. But when you look, you can see it doesn't say NRL 33. It says NRL 22.
Right.
So Newsweek actually copied it incorrectly, and in their original source, like we can see on the behind here, it says NRL 33. This article used to say NRL 77, and they edited it, they modified it. You know why they modified it? because I responded to them on Twitter the day that they posted this on August 8th. Before I had any followers, I had 30 followers. I was the top reply on their post about this and said, you guys are liars. There is no NROL 77, doesn't even exist. And NROL 33 doesn't say that either in the bottom left. It was crazy because a guy that's about to testify to Congress at the UFO hearings next week, Tim, I'm going to butcher his last name, Gallouet, it's a French thing. I can't do French names. He's like an admiral. He was on Chris Leto, and Chris Leto was asking him about these videos. And he goes, well, I read some Newsweek debunk that said that the satellite wasn't even in orbit yet or whatever. I'm going, what? Like, how are you not even, and this was well after we had already shown that it's NROL 22. It's like, so the reason why I bring this story up is, A, you're a person that's literally going to testify in Congress who was an admiral. He was tricked by a fake Newsweek debunk. And he's about to go testify next week. Actually, it'll have happened in the past by the time this airs. And he's going to tell the world, this is spoiler alert for people who didn't watch the hearing, depending a few days from now or a few days ago, depending on when you're watching this. He's just going to tell the world that these UFOs can go underwater or whatever. Cool, whatever, man. That's neat. That's like old news to me, but
sure
for other people, we already knew that, right? So I just bring that up because I want the audience to understand that, like, even people that they think they're kind of like on the cutting edge of disclosing this type of technology, even they are just completely in the dark about some of this stuff. And when it comes to black projects in general, which I think we're definitely going to be digging into here when we look at this stuff, admirals and generals, they are not necessarily in the know at all. I think this is one of the major misconceptions. Just because you're in the military does not mean you're in the know. I love Commander Fravor of the Nimitz incident. I think he's a very honorable, straight up guy. But when he says stuff like, I would know if we have this technology, he couldn't be more wrong. There's no chance a guy who's just a commander is going to know about this technology unless he happened to be exposed to it directly.
If people at that level know, then we know.
Yeah, exactly, because it leaks out. Right. It does leak out, and they know that, and that's why when you look at the bigot lists for who are in these special access programs, it's actually mostly contractors. It's like actually not the people you would expect, like the generals and navies. It's like a physicist who's like in the black project world, and these project managers for like Lockheed Martin and stuff like that. So let's go back to this video, though. I want to point out some details. If you go ahead and play the video, we can see this plane coming in right away. We can see smoke coming out of the back of it. We can tell this is smoke coming out of the back of the plane because we're looking at cumulus clouds in the background. That's a super important clue. The types of clouds in the background are low altitude clouds, which means we can't tell the exact altitude here, but we can assume very accurately that it's relatively low. And contrails only form at high altitudes, so that can't be contrails. Watching these orbs come in and dance around the plane is just the most mind-blowing thing ever, because I'm not actually even sure that even today, with today's CGI technology, that you could easily recreate the movement of the orbs around the plane. It seems like it would be very difficult. It's just too exact. And we have two videos from two completely different angles, and the orbs are in perfect synchronization in both of them. They initially start spinning around the plane, mapping it, and then they go vertical here. And then poof. Now, one thing I want to point out about that zap, you could see it illuminate. People ask, why is it illuminating? That is a weird detail. Why would it flash? Not only does it flash, the flash accurately illuminates the entire environment in 3 dimensions. This is another detail that shows that we're looking at real clouds. We're looking at 3-dimensional clouds, and we're not looking at a 2-dimensional picture here. This is not a 2-dimensional visual effect that was added to this video. And we know because somebody tried to do a recreation of this, and this is one of the things they messed up. The biggest things they messed up was the plane, the orbs around the plane, and the zap being accurately illuminated in 3 dimensions. It's very, very difficult, especially in 2014, to get this type of accurate zap. Now, why is this happening? It took several months to get to dig into the science to find out. There's something called the dynamic Casimir effect and the Schwinger effect, which would say that if you achieve a certain level of electromagnetic intensity, energy levels, that you can essentially break through the fabric of reality to the underlying framework and pull real photons directly out of, I'm going to call it the ether. I like to call it the ether, but this idea that there's energy there. And what happens when you're pulling real photons out of the ether? A flash. So why are we seeing a flash here? Because we're breaking through the fabric of reality, breaking the Schwinger limit, And the virtual photons that current physics knows are there, we're pulling them straight out of the ether, manifesting them into our reality just like that. And that's exactly what we would expect from the dynamic Casimir effect is what we see right there. So to me, that is just absolutely incredible. It turns out scientifically, this is what we would expect to see from like a wormhole. Now, you could still argue that this is some type of annihilation event. Like, if you let this play, you can see that the smoke stops right there. It doesn't keep going. I kind of wish the smoke kept going, because then I could be like, oh, we cloaked the plane, and, it must be there. They zoom over to the right, and it just kind of show you there's nothing here. Like, there's no smoke, there's no plane. And then the cursor goes to the top right again, and then the screen goes dark. This is actually still playing in the background, but the screen's just dark for like another minute. This tells me that the start, stop, record button was right up there in the top right, because the mouse initially comes off from that location in the beginning, and at the end, it goes back to the top right as well. Okay. See that? Do that right there. And because the mouse goes off the bottom left and the top right, we know we're looking at a much larger field of view. Which means if someone faked this using cloud pictures, they would have to stitch all the pictures together and then do some kind of weird recording over the top of it. That doesn't make any sense unless it's real. Especially because we realize that cursor is at 24 frames per second and the background is at 6 frames per second. This indicates that why would the background be at a different frame rate than the cursor? Well, because it's a Citrix session and they're on a computer remotely logged in to a remote terminal session. Right there, see how this orb doesn't quite, right at the beginning, the orb kind of circles around the plane. This is clearly some kind of tracking and homing mechanism. It hasn't locked in on the plane, and it does one orientation, one spin on the side of the plane, and then it locks in. So go ahead and play it. So you'll see this spin, and then it locks in on the plane, and now it's revolving around the plane. And now the second and third orbs appear right away, and they are immediately locking on the plane. I think that's just an amazing detail that tells me that whatever technology this is, we have tracking and homing and vectoring capabilities that are far beyond what the public understands right now. Because they're doing this in a three-dimensional environment. The first orb comes in at almost hypersonic speeds, thousands of miles per hour, and then immediately slows down and matches the speed of the plane perfectly. And this speed of the plane isn't even flying at cruising speed. It's turning, we can see it turning, it's descending, and it's flying low. So these things, it's actually kind of slow, the same way where if you're in a car turning around a bank, you have to slow down. Same idea here. It's only going about 150 to 250 miles per hour on the bank. What other details do I want to point out here?
Is it when it's mapping the plane? Is it and they keep going around and around and around? Is it creating? It's creating an image of the plane, I guess. Is it like almost from a spherical standpoint?
I think so, because when you people did so much analysis in these videos a year ago, it kind of blew me away, where people mapped out the orientations of the orbs, and they found if you squeeze time down, it actually is making a spherical pattern around the plane, which to me would say, yes, it must be mapping it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the logical conclusion. Mm-hmm. I imagine it's trying to find the center of mass of the plane, because they're trying to figure out how big does the zap have to be to encompass the entire plane. In my opinion, what's being produced there is the mouth of a wormhole, and you have to make sure the mouth of the wormhole is big enough so that the whole plane's going to go through it.
Dude.
Otherwise, you're going to have a situation like Philadelphia experiment where people are trapped in the walls, right? Stuck in the wall.
Right.
One of the things you learn about wormholes when you dig into them is they are safe if you're in the middle of the wormhole. If you're on the edge of the wormhole, probably not going to go well. Don't touch the wall of the wormhole, people out there that, if you're going to go if you're planning to go through a wormhole.
Yeah. How long does the whole mapping process take?
That's the other thing too, is that if this was a destructive event, I would imagine it'd be much quicker.
Yeah.
Like an interception, boom, it's gone. As opposed to this whole video is about a minute long. So the mapping part's less than 30 seconds. It's pretty quick, but it's still a significant portion of time that it takes to do that. One other detail I want to point out here as well is that people claim they found a model of a Boeing 777. Well, of course, a real Boeing 777 is going to look like a model of a Boeing 777. That's the point. But then they use that model and they put it in this video to do a recreation, and it didn't match. And the funny part is, you know why it doesn't match? Because we're looking at infrared right here. And when planes fly in the sky, they radiate infrared radiation. They actually, the higher up you are and the longer you're in the air, the more infrared radiation you collect. So that's why the plane looks so bulky. It's kind of bulgy a little bit. That's the reason why, because it's literally radiating infrared. And this is another reason why this is absolutely real. If it was a fake video, we would see a stick figure of a plane that wouldn't look normal. But in this case, that's the reason why it looks bulky.
So right here where we see the two trails of smoke coming out of the back, if that was one question that I had, was if this were a fire event as opposed to engine exhaust, would we see one trail or two trails? Are the engines pulling the
Let's talk
smoke?
about that when we get to the second video, because there's actually a really powerful clue. In fact, maybe we just go to the second video right now. So this first video leaks. To me, that's absolute proof. There's enough evidence in that video that like it should have been investigated right away, but it gets ignored. So now, 2 to 3 weeks later, this video comes out. We can see the drone right there. Like that is a MQ-1 Reaper, Gray Eagle, some version of drone. We can tell the camera's under the wing. We can tell that there's a real operator controlling this camera. So this is being manually controlled.
So to the left, you've got the point, the nose of the drone itself, and then above at the beginning, Ryan.
If you scroll back, if you go back towards the beginning again real quick, because there's just so much detail in these videos. Like, again, we're looking at real clouds in the background here. This is nighttime. We're looking at it in thermal because it's nighttime. In fact, that's one of the reasons. You can see the heat signature on the brain of the drone there on the left as well. To me, that is like way too specific. Unless you understand how these drones look, operate, that's where the brain is, that's going to heat up like that. I don't even know how you could come up with that.
So that part opens up?
Yeah, that opens up. The lid opens up right there. Right. And so it's like, why are we seeing that heat signature there? Because the heat is seeping out through this little crack on the side of the drone, the nose of the drone. And we can't tell if we're looking at the wing or if we're looking at like the housing of the camera. A lot of these cameras, like they protrude out a little bit so you can actually see like the housing of the camera on there. But we can tell this plane flies this drone flies directly under the smoke. If you let it play here, the smoke stacks up accurately. So you're going to see this smoke get whiter or hotter as the kind of like right here, it stacks up on the right. And you can actually see the shake of the drone as well. These drones are actually very, very stable. If you guys go look at drone videos in general, even like commercial ones, you'll see that they're very stable in those situations as well, but there is some visible shake. Just watching these orbs is wild. Crazy, so pause this for just a second if you don't mind. Once the plane's in view, if you don't let it go, so the person manually controlling the camera is a huge detail, because you can tell there's a real person controlling this camera. There's a camera lag as well when they like zoom in and some of this. You can tell they're struggling to keep the plane in view. Just a second ago, the plane wasn't there, right? It was off the screen because this person is struggling. When you look at hoax videos, almost always the object of focus is in the center of the entire time. Like that's a good indicator, because someone took real footage and they superimposed something over the real footage is usually what they do. In this case, that's not happening. Now these orbs, we're starting to see why they're filming in infrared, because right away, right here, you can already tell we're not looking at a metallic sphere. You see this gradient color change between like light blue and green on these orbs. This is telling us that this thing is like a ball of energy that we're looking at right here, as opposed to just like when you look at the plane, you see a little bit of an outline, but you can really clearly see the heat signature of the plane as it sticks out. When we zoom in even more, we're going to see the heat signature of these orbs that's going to be indicative of cold fusion and what Bob Greenyer has talked to you about as well. Now, the last detail I want to point out here, and we're going to talk about these smoke trails when we zoom in further, but there are dark lines that you can barely see in this version of the video, but you can see these dark lines kind of around the orbs. These are actually leading the orbs forward. This is probably one of the biggest clues. There's another version of this video that you guys can find on my YouTube and that I show sometimes where we change the color gradient to show you much more clearly that these dark lines are leading the orbs forward. Kind of like in the movie Donnie Darko. I don't know if you ever saw that, but in Donnie Darko, weirdly, a plane crashes into his house and it becomes this time travel type event where he can start to see the geodesic path of his future. Like this weird thing comes out from in front of him and he's following it, and it's like following his future path. That's what these orbs are doing. They are creating a geodesic well, like a gravitational well in front of them and going forward. There's never, not in sci-fi, not in real thing, never been anything like this before, ever seen. Which should be a good indication that what we're looking at here is actually authentic. It's actually real, whatever it is, if there's an explanation for it. And it turns out there is. The answer is negative energy. The answer is the reason why these are dark, cold lines coming out in front of them, they're producing a negative energy well in front of them. And that's causing it to be like a little path that just they slide into, pretty much.
So speed makes no difference. So,
and then the question, how do they control their speed? Well, I would imagine they control it with whatever laser or whatever they're using to create that geodesic path. Like the more you pull out the energy from the region in front of you, the faster that you're gonna go. So imagine like you're changing the refractive index of the medium itself. By doing that, you change the speed of light. So the more energy you pull out of there, the refractive index changes more, the speed of light increases more. So the more energy you're pulling out of there, the faster you're going to go when you're going through that region. So I imagine all they need to control their speed and the direction is just a laser beaming in any 360-degree direction. And then the question is, well, what's controlling them, this and the other one? I mean, they're in this perfect triangle formation. To me, there's not anybody inside these orbs. There's no aliens, there's no people. This is being controlled, remote controlled, by probably a supercomputer or an AI or a quantum computer. Something that's very powerful that can run real-time updates in a three-dimensional environment. And so that's how I think these are being controlled. And these are already some of the main reasons why I think this is our technology, United States government technology.
Lockheed Martin.
I think that I would point directly at Lockheed Martin. Yeah, but there's other people that I suspect as well. Like, you know, just let's not leave Lockheed Martin out there by themselves. Even
Raytheon,
General Atomics, who produced the drone, they are way into cold fusion, way more than what people think. Raytheon, who makes some of the cameras and the sensors. Radar is not just a detection mechanism, it's also a energy projection mechanism. Northrop Grumman, even Boeing, they have something called Phantom Works. All of these defense contractors, they've been working on anti-gravity related stuff since like 1973, the Mansfield Amendment. That's when the military was no longer allowed to research applications that were not military related, not weapons related. So what that meant was that everything anti-gravity related went to the private defense contractors. It had to. And that's why we've reached this point now where we're in this UFO world where we look at stuff like this and we all go, well, that's aliens. We can't understand that. Well, the reason why we can't understand that is because the secrets are locked up in private companies that are working with our government that are completely immune to FOIA requests. There is no way to get this information out from them. And this is why no matter how much we talk to our government and demand that they give us the answers, they don't have them. They don't have anything that they have to say because it's all at Lockheed Martin, it's all in Northrop Grumman, and
so
all those other people.
Who is it? Who is it that is in contact with Lockheed Martin? Who is this group of people? It's not the government. It's not Congress. It's not the president. Who is it?
I like to call them the covert administrative elite. Some people call them the deep state or whatever you want to call them. When you really get down to the truth, it's a lot murkier than what the public. It's so easy to say, well, it's the government doing evil stuff. But really, when you look at this administrative elite, it's like people that are in the know, some people that have been exposed to this technology in the know in various branches of the military. And it's not necessarily the generals and the admirals, but it could be people that are other levels that like they were part of some secret spy plane program or something, right? And then you have the people at the top in the government that do know is obviously the president has to be read in on this stuff. At least read it on the fact that we have these kinds of super weapons. The people that would claim that like Trump must not know or he would let it spill, you guys are wrong. Sorry. He knows. I'm sure of it. Like Obama knew when we took this plane out. Whether or not he ran the operation is unlikely, but the director of national intelligence and the director of the CIA, they are generally in the know as well. And they would shoot information from like the NSA and the stuff where they're collecting the satellite imagery back up to the president. And they would say, hey, Obama, we teleported this plane away. We need you now to go do damage control. And then Obama would be the one to come up with the White House would come up with the policy. And they would say, okay, I'm going to go visit Malaysia next month. By the way, he did in April. And I'm going to smooth it over with Prime Minister Najib. And we're going to have Najib go and lie on national television. And, you know, we're going to say that the plane went into the South Indian Ocean in the middle of nowhere. We'll have some people leak it to the CNN. And then the other people that are involved are going to be like the people in the know, probably the top type people that are in these defense contractors or other third-party contractors, and then generally just rich people who are in the know. Like if you really want to get into the know on this type of technology, my advice would be get in touch with the engineers. The Black Project engineers, they're the ones in the know. Forget about the Lou Elizondos and the David Grushes. Like those are the ones that, you know, for show. Like if you want to hear some fun stories. If you want to know how the science and stuff works and how we're building this stuff, then you want to be talking to Eric W. Davis, Hal Pudoff, these guys that have been working in Black projects for decades and decades, and they have scientific papers that explain all this stuff.
So good segue real quick, because we'll talk more about those guys in a minute. But so do you think UFOs are real? Think there's something out there called UFOs, unidentified flying objects, that are floating around in the sky?
You mean unacknowledged effing objects? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, they exist.
So
now,
what do you think?
This whole idea that they're phenomena bothers me. I'll tell you the truth.
So we got this thing floating around here, right? This is my UFO floating around. It can be whatever you want. It can be a ball of light, it can be a flying saucer, whatever it is. Salvatore Pais, and by the way, am I saying your last name correctly? Is it Pais? Have I been saying it incorrectly this whole time?
Pais. It's Pais.
Pais.
So you've been saying
Dr.
it right.
Pais,
Yeah, you've been saying it.
What is the energy
Sal.
source?
Only Sal.
What is Sal? What is the
that?
energy source of this UFO? What in your opinion, what's the energy source? Where's the energy source coming from for this thing? It's floating around freely in the sky.
Well, quite possibly it's on board that craft, but exactly how it operates, whether it can manipulate the super force, in which case it's theirs, or it can generate certain conditioned electromagnetic fields which generate gravitational waves of high frequency, in which case it's ours, that power source would differ. So yeah.
So I don't understand how any power source could be on board, because again, Einstein, E equals mc squared. The amount of energy levels that would be required just to levitate for a prolonged period of time, the more mass you put in your craft, it's a self-defeating prophecy. The more energy it now requires for that thing to levitate. So how could it be something that's on board? To me, the only logical explanation would be that it must require an external energy source that's not on board. How would you respond to that?
I would beg to differ. Now, you and I have never had an argument, but in this, I must stand my ground. I believe that the energy source of this, of whatever, is on board. And why? Because it doesn't need to be something extremely big. Again, there's a lot of things that you can achieve via resonance and non-ionizing radiation, especially when you oscillate plasmas in a certain mode, certain fashion. I'll just leave it there. No numbers.
We'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's you know what? I'm fine. I'm happy to have disagreements, and professional disagreements, and understand I'm still learning about this a lot. So anything where I'm off base, please correct me. Now going back to your past.
But you must eventually elucidate your idea that the power source could be external to the craft, because it's interesting. It's very interesting. After all, you have to understand that if you consider something called God, what did he call it? Was it radiative energy? What did Nikola Tesla called his?
Radiant energy. The
radiant energy. That's it.
0 point energy.
Yes. And he had the ability to in a way, he had a very strange craft. I remember seeing it in one of his patents, but for some reason, it's very, you don't find that patent. It looks very strange. It looks almost like an asymmetric capacitor. Speaking of T.T. Brown. So anyway,
Do you believe in free energy? Tesla did.
By that you mean 0 point energy?
Oh, however you think of it. I think of it as 0 point energy. What do you think? Do you think we can extract 0 point energy?
Some people seem to think so. So who am I to differ? Why
So it's a
should I
big
say
dodge.
no to that? I I like to speak to things that I have knowledge of. And to me, I think the study of the superforce is very important as to exactly how, for example, ET guide their craft, because it seems to be far more than just something mechanical in nature, or rather electromagnetic. However you want to see it, it seems has to do with their consciousness as well, which is very, very strange. But go
Let's
ahead.
go back to your patents real quick, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
So let's straight up ask: are your patents operable? You know, there's a big
Every one of them has been enabled. That's why they
enabled's
were
different than
accepted.
operable, though. Enabled, there's two different terms there, but operable would imply that one has been produced and exists.
All these are
Enabled means it can
theoretical concepts. All these are theoretical concepts. As far as I know, the only thing that's been attempted was the high energy electromagnetic field generator. And we were not able to obtain charges, electrical charges for those ultracapacitors higher than, say, 10 to the minus 8 coulombs. And
Yeah,
we needed
but
at least 1 coulomb of charge to generate
that's
certain effects.
yeah, that's 8 orders of magnitude different than what you were trying to achieve. So how do you reconcile those results with your strong belief and opinion that your science is going to be proven to be real in the future? I mean, to me, there's a discrepancy. You know, you go looking at this result, and the mainstream people are looking at it going, well, he had his high energy electromagnetic field generator result, and the result is 8 orders of magnitude too low. So how is it that you're so confident that it can produce these energy levels?
Okay, from an electrified solid point of view, we should have gone with pelletrons, Van de Graaff generators. They can actually generate charges much higher than that. Then the whole idea was to prevent this object from arcing and losing the charge. So that would have to be done in specialized environments. I will not say exactly what can be done. But again, Van de Graaff generators, pelletrons, which are dynamic in nature, but you can think of them as dynamic Van de Graaff generators. They have the ability of generating very high electrical charges. The whole idea is how do you keep the electrified solid from arcing, from giving away that charge? And that's not simple. Now, but I believe the Schwinger limit can be broken, but with plasma, not with electrified solids. It's possible that also there may be a way to engineer an electrified solid to bring about Schwinger limit breaking, but it would be much harder from an engineering aspect.
Yeah, and
All
so
right.
this is what I was getting at, is that I saw one of your other interviews, and you did mention that, well, these solids can't obtain the energy levels that are required, but plasma might be able to. So what I'm hearing here is that you're saying that, well, the experiment that we didn't use the optimal medium in which to produce these energy levels, but that the plasmas, therefore theoretically could if we were using that. Just want to know, is that an accurate representation of what you're saying there?
In a way, but even the experiment itself, even though it had such a small charge on it, you have to remember there were 2 anomalies. If you fire that experimental results, which the Senate Armed Service Committee, the technical staffers that actually investigated the work, that came and interrogated Dr. Sheehy over it, among also the Invention Evaluation Board at the time, they concluded that these 2 anomalies had to be looked into, because even with small charges, you could not dismiss them. It'd be different if it was a one, only one anomaly, but there were 2, and they were specific to a particular biological sensation, which was reproducible. Look carefully into that, because if 10 to the minus 8 coulombs can generate that effect, Can you imagine what a 1 coulomb of charge could do? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So, what if these patents are so disruptive? And I've been hearing this all over. I've been hearing national security. Tucker Carlson was just talking to Clayton Morris, talking about he believes the truth of UFO disclosure is extremely disruptive. Then why would the Navy let these patents become publicly available? And I think I know the answer, but I want to hear your thought on it. You know, these patents, your patents, represent a technology shift that could be free energy, certainly means propulsion mechanisms that can make us interstellar. Why are we telling everybody about it?
Given the 1951 Security Act, I asked myself the same thing. As a matter of fact, the patent attorney for the organization I was working for at the time, in a way, questioned why was this let out into the open. To this day, I'm not sure. It could quite be that they could not find anything wrong with the physics, and yet to the Invention Evaluation Board, this sounded very much like science fiction. The only reason that they put them out again is that they couldn't find anything wrong with the physics. There was nothing. And as a matter of fact, you're going to remember that 5 times I went in front of the Invention Evaluation Board. And again, maybe the passion in my voice, maybe the fact that I went to the dry board and actually showed them the equations, showed them the exact derivation from Maxwell's equation, exactly what I was talking about. Yeah. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, 5 times I did this. And maybe I was able to convince them that I actually knew what I was talking about. And I do know what I'm talking about. So
do you think that Russia and China have this technology already? Do you think that might be a reason why they let it come out?
I have no idea whatsoever, but you have to understand that I truly believe that I'm not an original in this. I'm 100% sure that someone would have noticed this in the time of Oliver Heaviside, and how should I say, the Heaviside version of Maxwell's equations coupled with a simple harmonic oscillator gives the Pais effect. Of course, not taking into consideration the cold plasma, the non-equilibrium effects, and so forth. That's a whole different matter, the whole idea of breaking the Schwinger limit. But someone would have realized that such electromagnetic energy fluxes of such high intensity are feasible at that time. And quite possibly because there were such great engineers. I mean, these were times that gave rise to people like Nikola Tesla. They were most likely they questioned. These were great engineers, man. And I truly believe that at that point in time, it's as if there was a timeline shift. It's as if quantum mechanics took over the minds of everyone. And instead of following, say, Maxwellian and Einsteinian physics on one path, everybody just went for the quantum mechanics way.
So are you saying that we can amplify energy? Do you believe that that's possible? That we can just take energy in a circuit and amplify it using, say, like parametric oscillations?
Resonance effects. Absolutely. Look carefully at one particular paper, IEEE plasma. It's published in IEEE Transactions on Plasma Science. The title of the paper is The Plasma Compression Fusion Device. It's the one paper that was truly accepted by one of the most prestigious journals in existence on plasma physics. This is IEEE TPS that accepted this. And it's being cited by very high level Chinese research teams. One of them actually IEEE Journal of Cybernetics. You have to ask yourself why. It's very interesting, but look very careful in that paper, equations 5 and 6. There's one particular equation that speaks to a resonance effect that from that based on certain frequencies, based on certain conditions, you can have energy, great energy amplification started from modest power levels. Let's leave it at that. It's interesting that they have found that paper and they're really. It's interesting that they're citing it. It's as if they're holding it up and saying, "Yeah, look at this, interesting."
Yeah. So, I mean, amplification of energy to me is massive. And that's something that I took away from our first interview a year ago, which could mean that you can achieve energy levels, any energy level that you need for anything, which to me is extremely dangerous. And if that's true, that could explain why this science, this technology is kept secret for the interest of national defense. Whether or not we can pull infinite energy from the environment is a different question. And I think either of these being true, either pulling infinite energy from the environment or amplifying energy that we already have, are both just extremely dangerous, and the implications are huge. But if that's also true, it can't be kept hidden forever. And the reason why I point this out is because you've mentioned, and you mentioned again just now, that how could other scientists not have seen this in the Maxwell's equations? How could they not have seen this in the Heaviside version of the equations that are out there? It's just simple math. You look at the energy level, it's equal to something squared. You know, that's an exponential growth indicator. Now,
You have
what I want to do
very
next, go ahead if you have comments.
observations. Yeah, you have very astute observation, bro. I've noticed certain things about you. I gotta say it to your audience because I do respect you greatly. I think within the last year you've really come up. It is amazing you are not of a physics pedigree, because I believe that you can actually hold your own with almost anyone in the field if they're willing to give you a chance to speak. See, that's the big if.
Yeah, people
However,
don't
in my
like it.
opinion, you have the 3 P's, brother. All right. You have patience, you have persistence, and you have perspicacity, which leads to the big P. I believe that one day you shall prevail in your quest to prove MH370 is a very real thing.
I hope so. Yeah, and I think a lot about our last conversation where you said one of the things you said is, man, you said something like, I think about what Ashton would have to go through to prove that this stuff is real. And I think about that almost every day because, man, it had to go through a lot of crap in order to try to get this information out there, which is why I appreciate you being here. And actually, I want to ask you a few questions about the MH370 videos here and just get right to it. So, I mean, my first question is, when did you first hear about me or see those videos? Was it after I reached out to you, or had somebody reached out to you before that made you aware of my stuff?
Exactly when you reached out to me, I started looking into you because I had no idea what to expect. You told me that I was going to be your first Hard Truths podcast. And that's a really cool name, I got to say, Hard Truths, because this is the hardest truth imaginable. So you hit that nail right on the head, bro. That's a great podcast name.
So you saw it for the first time right after I got in touch with you. You saw it, and now I want to know what your impressions were when you watched. And I'm going to pull the video up here where we can kind of look at it together. I mean, what were your impressions when you saw specifically this video here for the first time?
Oh man, when I saw those orbs, I saw this one orb just start exactly what it's doing now. Just start to go around this thing. And all of a sudden it started join another one and then another one. And I said, oh my God, they're forming a bubble of non-ionizing radiation around this thing. There's no way what's about to happen. I anticipated. Do you understand? I knew before that black hole happened. Let's call it a black hole.
You knew that was going to happen beforehand? Just
I
watching
knew
that?
that would happen. I knew that would happen. That's why
Really?
when I said, this is it. This is the Pais effect. I of course, it's, hubris. That's the only thing I got going for me, brother. That's not one thing I'm losing anytime soon. So
Have you ever seen
I said,
videos like this? Military videos like this before? Anything even similar or remotely similar to this?
uh, never ever. And even if I have, because
You wouldn't be able to
remember,
talk
at
about it?
one point I would not be able to discuss because that would give away methods. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I had to ask anyway. Now, when you watch this part at the end with the slow-mo, what are you thinking as an engineer here? Like, what does this make you think of when you're watching this?
Oh my goodness. Uh, I was absolutely, I could not believe that this was happening.
Why do you
At
think they were
first,
converging like that at the end?
they're actually focusing as much non-ionizing radiation around this craft in order to condition the local vacuum around the craft, the aircraft, in order to form this wormhole opening for one of the Becker. What's a wormhole? It's really a black hole connected to white hole. Whatever has an entrance will most likely have an exit. I do not believe in space-time singularities. I'm afraid Penrose was 100% wrong from this point of view. It never goes to zero. There's a quantum bounds. Ashtekar is correct. There's an Ashtekar bounds at the Planck scale. There's no such thing as a space-time singularity. And this whole idea of I can't even pronounce it. It's so idiotic. Every time I hear, oh, we're going to be pulled into the thing. And look, it's just a way to travel.
Do you think that there is a Casimir effect happening here, be offsetting a Coulomb repulsion effect when they converge together? Because when I see that conversion, I immediately think of Coulomb force. Distance between two charged objects being reduced, is going to increase your force exponentially. Do you think
I
that's
look at Coulomb force is really the force of repulsion between particles of the same charge. That's the way I view the Coulomb force. Again, the whole idea of why I thought that they were getting close and started to oscillate around this thing is to basically create that resonance effect that would build the field to the levels it would need to break locally the Schwinger limit. That's why I thought that they would start pulsating inward. You see how they start oscillating around this thing. And at one point, you can actually see them change course, change direction. That's also very interesting. Because
you mentioned that with the vectoring earlier at the beginning as well, is that you thought that it must be related to time. And that part is really...
And it's so freaking simple because think from a dimensional scaling point of view, just from a simple dimensional analysis. Time goes as 1 divided by frequency. It could be spin or vibration. It doesn't matter. The mathematics are similar for both spin and vibration. Anyone that wants to study that, go to a first year college book, and you'll see why I say the mathematics of spin and vibration are very similar. Now, the whole idea, once you have time, is on the order of 1 divided by frequency if you use the chain rule. So we talk about first year differential calculus, the chain rule. Okay? In this case, would be A divided by B, where A, B are functions of, say, the same variable, X. Just look up the formula and you will see that what you get once you apply the chain rule to T is on the order of 1 divided by frequency. You get minus delta T. So minus the change in time is on the order of the change in omega. So in other words, the change in frequency divided by the frequency squared. That comes right out of the chain rule. And you have to ask yourself at that time, just think Minkowski space-time metric. When you have delta x equal delta y equal delta z equals 0, so say you center this thing, you get as a solution of the space-time metric of Minkowski space-time metric minus ds equals c, the speed of light, times dt. Well, that minus dt, put in this formula and you'll see how displacement can come from basically bathing this craft in a, say, frequency, a non-ionizing radiation. It's important, and actually, it's very interesting because the Pais effect speaks to this. But anyway, why non-ionizing? Because it would have been easily detected on the infrared imagery if it was ionizing, right?
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Now
So
we're going to
so
talk
we're
more
talking
about the
about
whole
something small and then terahertz level. Very interesting. All right,
extremely
go
short
ahead.
frequency. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in just a second. There's a couple more questions on the videos. Do you think this video is a test? If you were to look at this as somebody who's works for the military, do you think like if what you're looking at here is real and this is breaking the Schwinger limit as you're claiming here, do you think that this technology has been used before, or do you think anything that you watch this video leans you one way or another on that? And really what I'm getting at here is, how long do you think we've had this technology if this video is real? This is 10 years old.
Dude, if this is, look, the physics that I see here seems very plausible to me, given the Pais effect, given the idea of the superforce, given the idea of time is on the order of 1 divided by frequency that we just spoke of, coupled with the Minkowski metric. All this makes sense. Number one, instinctually, call it intuitive science and technology.
Yeah.
I see this as being extremely plausible. Number one. Number two, if this was a forgery and so forth, whoever did this would have had to be an expert in physics. Not only that, a mind of such great imagination would have.
Maybe Eric Davis made the videos. Now, real quick,
only a
let me ask you
person of
another
that
question here.
nature. Go ahead, sir.
Why is this black? You can actually see this open up and you can see it close as well. Black is cold. We know, we can tell just looking at the engines literally on. Well, what does this mean when this is black, Sal?
Do you remember when you and I spoke, when I say you can almost see a refraction wave as if this was fluid dynamics, as if what you're doing here, throwing a pebble into a pool. Have you ever seen a pebble thrown into a pool? When it enters, it forms this almost black-like cavity because light does not penetrate in the quote-unquote black hole that you're creating. There is, you can't see through it because you see, when think of it from a fluid dynamics point of view, this is a medium. The quantum vacuum is a medium, the so-called vacuum energy state, because a state represents a structure. And what we're looking here is a structure that has a certain vacuum energy. What you have done is condition that vacuum energy, manipulate it to the point that it no longer, at that particular point that you see so black, that's the actual nothingness. What you see around it is what you have done to achieve that nothingness. The medium, the quantum vacuum, is a thing, is a material entity. Look at Frank Wilczek and how he argues against Lawrence Krauss. When Lawrence Krauss goes on his diatribe about everything came from nothing. There's no such thing as nothing unless you yourself create it.
Yeah.
There
So do you
must
think this is
always
negative
be a
energy?
quantum vacuum.
Would you call this negative energy then?
I choose not to use those terms because I'm again, that's going too far. Even not even I dare negative. See, to me, it's either not there or there's something to it. The idea of going negative to me is more like Cartesian coordinates. It's something that you yourself has. What is the word I'm looking for? It's a way that we're addressing things. All right.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I got something on my screen.
Well, I think
but
of it as just going below sea level, but I guess what you're getting at is that you're pulling energy, but the energy is still just normal energy. You know, you're just, in my opinion, you're just going below what we thought of as absolute zero.
Okay. All right. The way I would think of then is negative energy density that would speak to a
Yeah.
negative pressure. A negative pressure I can deal with because it means a suction pressure. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're creating a conditioned vacuum whereby the craft is sucked into that conditioned vacuum. That hole that you're creating is a zone of negative energy density. Then you and I are on the same level of speak.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. Okay, so let me just get right to it. So, did you make those orbs, Sal, in that video? I mean, I'm looking at your patents, and you have to understand that if I add up your patents, you have a magnetically confined fusion patent, high frequency gravitational wave, high temperature induced or piezoelectric induced high temperature superconductivity, inertial mass reduction for a transmedium craft, and high energy electromagnetic field generator. You add that up, and it looks a lot like an orb that could float around freely with no inertia and achieve superluminal speeds like we're seeing in those videos. And it might be the Navy recording that video as well. And it was in 2014, like right before you dropped your patents. So do you have some connection to that video?
Complete serendipity and synchronicity. Sometimes these things just happen. This is why I believe in something more than our quote unquote reductionist materialistic physical view of the world. I do not understand why it happened. I do not understand. Sometimes I wonder myself who gave me these ideas, who put them in my head. They've been there for some time. It all started with that paper, Conditional Possibility of Spacecraft Propulsion at Superluminal Speeds. Took me 4.5 years to get that paper published. Finally, it was published only when that other paper, High Energy Electromagnetic Field Generation, was published. And again, all the time I've had to work for it extremely hard to get these ideas through. And yet, at that point in time, it all worked out. You have to ask yourself why. Who gave the okay? What made certain things occur for this to happen then and there? I tell you, man, I think what we're dealing with here is a war between the children of darkness and the children of the light. And it's been going on for epochs, for eons. Sometimes they have a small victory. Sometimes there's something happening. Everything is being driven toward a certain culmination point. I don't know what that point is. And I know this sounds weird, but
No,
I'm
it doesn't
starting
sound
to
that
believe
weird. But I mean, like, are you recognizing your patents in this video? Like, the thing I couldn't get past last time was why you were praising me so much when you were a Navy engineer and I was just some guy being like, hey, these videos are crazy. Like, can this be real? And I literally thought that like you had gone to the future and met a future version of myself, or maybe I went to the past or something. But then I thought about it some more and I went, this guy must be recognizing his technology in these videos. And there's not a lot of people on Earth that would have that revelation. Like, that's why I asked you the question on what you recognize in this video. So are you recognizing your work or any component of your work in this video?
Let me just answer it this way, brother. If I was the creator of those orbs, I would be in a skiff within a skiff within a skiff. You understand? You would have never heard of my name. You would have never heard of my existence. I would be one of those people you have never heard of that was so incredibly genial that all the powerful beings in this world would come to me as I don't know, as an oracle, you know, of science and technology. Kind of think of him. Think of me at that point in time, kind of like an invisible Elon Musk type. You know, it's that's not the case, brother. I am not the inventor of those orbs. Although I wish I would have been. I'll tell
Do
you
you
the
think
truth.
that Hal Puthoff or Eric Davis know who made those orbs?
Quite possible. I mean, these are people of extreme brilliance, and I'm pretty sure that they know a lot more than I do.
Yeah.
Let me repeat what I said. I think it's important that you hear this word for word. The NASA independent study team did not find any evidence that UAP have an extraterrestrial origin. But we don't know what these UAP are, but we're going to try to find out.
Thank you very much. And is there a plan in place if it is determined that some of them originate from a non-human intelligence to tell the public? Is there a plan or?
If we are what I said we intend to be, which is transparent, you bet your boots. We will say that. Whatever we find, we're going to tell you.
And we made a list of well over a couple dozen issues that would have to be addressed. And some of them really got into the nitty-gritty, like, well, if Corporation A finds out that Corporation B had access to the advanced materials from crash retrievals and they didn't, well, then they're going to sue that corporation. They're also going to sue the government because they didn't get access and one of their competitors did. So, you know, when we added up all the numbers, it turned out that despite our personal feelings about it as we entered this process, we came to the conclusion that disclosure was kind of unsustainable, almost. It's a bigger, more complex issue than most people probably appreciate when they just say, well, why don't they just tell us what's going on, be more transparent? Well, there's a lot of things have to happen before you can get to that point.
What about the drones over New Jersey? Do you think that what do you think about those?
Oh, I don't think that they're Chinese, like he's saying. I think that that letter is written from the perspective of somebody that potentially was exposed to the reality that there is this exotic technology that's out there. And maybe they saw it as part of those operations, those black operations they were talking about. And they just know that there's anti-gravity stuff, and the rest of the world just has no idea. And they're using that to speculate that those drones were Chinese spy drones. Maybe they are. Maybe they're 100% right. And maybe we couldn't shoot them down because of their like plasma drones or something like that. And conventional weaponry doesn't really work on them. And maybe we didn't want to shoot off EMPs over people's houses in the residential zone. I'm not sure. But at the same time, it could just as easily have been like us or black projects on our side that were our own drones that were like that. But I do think that most of what people were seeing, it became hysteria right away, where most people then just start recording like planes, and they're saying that's, a drone shape-shifting into a FAA regulated lights plane situation. But I do know that we've got this technology that's out there, and I think that many other countries, even beyond China, are going to start to get these plasma drones that can, by the way, transmedium. So they could theoretically get deployed from a submarine, like he was saying in that letter, which is a very specific thing to say, is that these are being deployed from submarine. But if it's just a ball of plasma, then it can be transmedium, and it can flow through the water and then out of the water and flow through the air. And yeah, that fits with the research that I've done into how these EVOs, exotic vacuum objects, ball lightning, plasmoids, there's all these different terms for them, but that seems to be the direction this whole UFO thing is going in.
Yeah, it feels to me like Matthew's email was a limited hangout. It's like, here's some true information in it, but we're going to change it to China. It's not our subs. It's the Chinese subs are off the coast doing this. And really what he was actually wanting to say was US subs are on the side doing this. Like, this is us and our technology. And it also feels like these New Jersey drones are also a limited hangout. It's like the US government saying, well, how do we ease people into knowing we have this type of tech? And the fact that these other countries have it too, and it's about to be revealed. So we have to reveal that we have it as well. Well, we'll start doing UFO hearings. We'll start doing, we'll start have drone sightings, UFO sightings, above people's houses, and then you got Donald Trump coming out saying things like, they know what it is. I don't know why they're not telling you, but they're not. They're just telling. They don't want to tell you. And that to me sounds like, yeah, because they're ours, and they just don't want to say they're ours just yet. That would just open up a can of questions that they don't want to answer, right? So I mean, it
This feels like
does.
a TV production, though, right? Like with like the whole like these UFO hearings, and it's all a bunch of spooks that are doing all the testifying.
Well, but I mean,
except for Michael
who else would
Schellenberger.
do it? But who else would be the people with the information? I mean, so it's believable, right? Because it's like, who else would have the information and access to those types of records, except for a bunch of spooks? Like how? So you got to bring them in. I mean,
Well, it's like for me, it's like that's not how I imagine it going down. And I'm curious your thoughts. Is that I just imagine like something, well, not to speak too much about MH370, but like leaked videos, like get out to the public through shadowy connections or whatever. I didn't imagine they would just be out there waiting to be found. But that too is that the thing that was missing from those UFO hearings was there was no evidence. Like you can tell stories all day long. I don't care what your credentials are. End of the day, you're not wheeling the alien bodies out. You're not showing me anti-gravity something or other or a free energy device or whatever. Like, what are you really doing for me? And
I want to see the body of the alien, right? I want to see the photographs of what the hell the alien looks like, but we haven't seen
it's not even getting up to have photographs anymore. Like, it's got to be like, you got to wheel the alien body out at this point. Like, we got a bio or whatever, wheel that bad boy out. Joe Biden can't be in the picture. I 100% won't believe it. But something like that. But the real thing is that they even said that we've got full motion video, satellite video of UFOs. Both Tim Gallaudet, who's a rear admiral in the Navy. By the way, he's got to know that MH370 videos are real. It's hard for me to believe that he doesn't, given his position. And then also Michael Schellenberger from his Immaculate Constellation says that there's all these videos that we've got. And I believe it because now that I've researched our surveillance apparatus, there are not stuff flying around there that we're not seeing. Like, we're seeing everything. And people say, oh, you really think they're tracking every plane? I know they're tracking every plane. Like, it goes well beyond that. We're in the area where they're like tracking every car and building like a persona about what you do and where you go based on just automated, like AI is doing that.
Yeah.
So, so the thing is, like, we have these videos that are out there, and I expect those videos will leak on the internet. But they rarely do, because if that were to happen, you go to prison for like the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, it would be considered a breach of national security if somebody were to leak out what type of military tech the U.S. has. And but what the alleged email from Matthew Leibelsberger says is, he says the so what is because, we need to know that that China and the United States have this tech that could end with mutual destruction. He also says the United States government needs to give the history of this, how we are employing it, weaponizing it, how China is employing them, and what the way forward is. China is poised to attack anywhere on the East Coast. That part, to me, again, I think limited hangout type. I don't know, maybe somebody was in there inserting some, we got to get China before China gets us. That is what will lead to mutually assured destruction. I mean, the one thing that has been saving us from mutually assured destruction, surprisingly, has been us having nukes and Russia having nukes, right? Both countries have nukes, and we don't want to piss each other off. So we always take it right up to the edge, and then we're like, okay, we'll back it up. We don't really want to cross that line. We just want to look strong. You know how it goes. And I'm sure our leaders and Putin are like, sitting in a back room, smoking cigars, drinking their whiskey and vodka and being like, we just got to make it look tough. We got to look tough. We got to look tough and strong to our people. You know how it goes. But we're really not going to blow each other up. Come on. I kind of wonder if that's what's going on in the background. But China also is a nuclear country. So are we. But if there's this extra special tech, and if China's about to unveil it or show it off, the U.S. has to be able to show off ours as well. I mean, it would be disastrous, I think, for people, just the mindset of a lot of Americans to be like, what? You're saying we don't we have the nukes, and now we've got this new tech. We can't be the ones without when another country has it. People will start getting hysterical, even though I don't know if China would really do anything to us, or, if there's a lot of countries in this world that do not have nukes, and we have not gone around nuking them. So not having the tech is not a sign, but it is, but you do end up getting, controlled by the one with the tech. So that is a fear, because we certainly do that to everybody around us, right?
That's why I think the U.S. is the one that has it right now. Is that you look at who's the big bully on the block, And you'll hear
Yeah,
Putin say, "Oh,
it's
we've got
still the
these
United States.
hypersonic missiles," and the United States doesn't even respond. It feels like feels like Putin trying to say, "Oh, I figured this out," but you're like, "Yeah, that's cute. That's cute. You go sit down at the kids' table now."
Yeah. And the fact that, like, the Israelis, for example, what they've been able to do in this war and how they've been able to track down all the leaders of all these different organizations and blow them up. And that's the type of surveillance that Matthew was talking about in this email, right? Is saying, like, you've got this stealthy surveillance ability and you're able to stealthily surveil without people even knowing they're being surveilled, essentially. And so you would be able to gather that kind of data. And it makes me wonder if the US does have that tech and is letting Israel in on the intel, whether we're letting them actually have the tech or not, but certainly allowing them to have the intel from the tech if we do have that type of tech that Matthew says we do have and that we've been using to surveil in Afghanistan even, right? That was his assertion in this email.
Yeah, that's one of the topics I don't really dig too much into, but it wouldn't surprise me if we do have some connections with, of course, our allies overseas, and the technology that we share with them for sure is definitely an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, no matter which side you're on that debate, right? It's on that issue, we would be giving the Israelis I don't know if we'd give them the tech, but like I said, we'd give them the intel from that tech if we're using that tech for that type of thing. Anyway, interesting. So you think this email's real? Do you think it was written under duress?
I think that's a real email. I think it's extremely likely it came from Matthew Livelsberger. I think the content of it, just because of how many paragraphs there are about the whole thing with anti-gravity in China, I think there's something there, but I don't read it in the way where I take everything at face value, like you said as well, with the limited hangout points about some of it. Or some of it, either maybe he's just extrapolating based on information he knows, or could be disinformation, what have you. It does seem very complex email. And we didn't get to the other part with the black ops and the other confirmations, but Sean Ryan stands by it behind a bunch of other people that are feds they're really kind of anti-government, but they're also big guys that care about their credibility. The signal number change. Yeah, to me, this is a real message. I happen to agree that, yes, we do have that technology there, regardless of whether or not it's true or not. And I just want to know what happened to this guy. I think that there's some sketchiness happening here with respect to it, and there's narratives being built. And I just want to know what the real truth is about what happened with this guy in the final days.
Yeah, and they're saying that he shot himself in the head first, but then there's a lot of questions about how do you do that, and then pull the trigger on the explosion. And also some people say that they see him moving in the car, right before the explosion. And it's like, well, if he was already dead, how did he move? There's a lot of questions there. Still a lot of questions.
Yeah,
I don't know
point I want to add as well. If you don't mind, it is really important, is that if he wanted to harm more people, he easily could have. He could have ran people down. He could have detonated in a crowd of people. This was Vegas.
Yeah.
Is huge. Like, there's that clear symbolism between where it happened, and I don't take him to be a terrorist that was trying to cause maximum carnage, because he easily could have caused more if he wanted.
Yeah. A lot of things don't add up. He was a Trump supporter. He liked Elon. So why would he choose a Cybertruck in front of Trump Tower? Right. Unless somebody was certainly trying to send a message, that's for sure. But what was the message? And is it consistent? I don't know about that with him in particular, but I'm sure the message was received, whatever that message was, for whoever was meant to receive it. I'm sure they received it. Ashton, where can people find you and your great work?
Yeah, and prayers to the family of Matt Livelsberger as well. Like, I don't know if we have a lot of reason to think that we should demonize him for whatever reason. And I'm sure they're going through a hard time. But yes, people can find my work at JustXAshton, mainly on Twitter, or X now, also on YouTube. I've been having pretty big live streams about the science and stuff like this. I've made a lot of great connections just through my interactions and with people like you. And then you can also find some clips of me on TikTok and Instagram as well.
Well, we have your Twitter down below, and I'm sure that's where people can find everything else if you follow on Twitter. So, Ashton, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Kim.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, are things getting crazier, as if this drone madness has not been crazy enough. These things are popping up in more cities. This one is New Jersey, but in a couple minutes, you're going to see some right in my own backyard. figuratively, I'd say about 12 miles away from me in Hollywood, California. That is right. And a second one here in Greater Los Angeles. Now, originally, as you heard me say a couple times before, look, in this one, even the police are interested. That's right. The police are actually responding to this. You've heard me say that a few of them absolutely are probably misidentified human drones, probably from China, Iran, Russia, checking out our airspace over sensitive areas because they know we've had a very weak government and they want to get in as much before Trump comes in and cracks the whip. But now you're hearing reports that these things are coming from the water. We're talking USOs.